Hi, everybody. If I don't know you already, I'm Bobby Carlton. I'm the founder of Innovation Women. And today we're here for another awesome Lioness community meeting. And just a heads up for everybody, we use these meetings as a way to collect information from you all, and we use these things in articles. So, that means, heads up, anything you say can and will be used against you. All right, so this is your PR person speaking. You have all been suitably warned. That said, if you say something and it's not quite right, just reach out to me. I'm not like waiting to jump on you and cause trouble. Next slide, Laura. All right, so just some guidelines of our events. We do ask that you use the raise your hand function. You can find that in the Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen if you have a question or input on the ongoing discussions. And again, any self promotional things, drop that information into the chat. We are going to start off with a question where I'm going to ask everyone to share in the chat first. But definitely, if you have things to say, again, use that raise your hand function. Next slide. So we're going to be talking about some of our upcoming events. We'll pop those links in the chat as well. Today, we're going to be talking about podcasting and business growth. We're going to have a group discussion, and we're going to have the ability to do a little bit of the takeaways and wrap ups. And again, we will share information about future events. So, next slide. And just a reminder that our next roundtable, we're going to continue the conversation that we had last month, where we were talking about the author's journey. And we had so many people that were interested in writing books and things like that, that it became such an incredible conversation. We're just going to continue it. So, if you are interested in joining us at that, I just dropped that link into the chat. I'll do it again. And that will be on Thursday, June 11th from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern. And that will be a roundtable discussion just like this one, where we'll be collecting information that we use to write articles. Next slide. I think that's everybody. Oh, great reminder. So if you haven't been here before, this is just a part of what we do for our community of women entrepreneurs. We have all kinds of other things that are just for our members. So we had coffee talk this morning. Hi, Amy. Hi, Jessica. And we have monthly pitch sessions. We have co-working now that we do twice a week. So if you have projects to do and you want to bring them to a little online session where everybody is getting something done, it's a great way to do that. And I also want to point out great resources such as our awesome database of grants, awards, and other ways to bring in the almighty moolah to your business. So, those are just a few of the great resources we provide you as part of being a Lioness Premium member or an Innovation Women Entrepreneur member. So, yes, Lori, almighty moolah, it's very important. All right, so we are going to move on to our discussion today. And I would love to have you all put this one into the chat. So this will be a chat question. What is one podcast you've been listening to lately that you would recommend other people listen to? Bonus points for a link, but don't worry, we can go and look things up. And what keeps you coming back to that podcast? And I want to keep that question rolling. Basically, you can pop that in at any time during the discussion. So That is definitely an oh yes. That sounds amazing, Dana. These are great suggestions. Keep them coming. So let us talk about podcasting and podcasting to drive your business. Laura, we've got that survey, right? Let's start off with our first survey question. And let's ask people about their role in the podcasting world. So, what role do you play in the podcast world? And you can do multiple things here. So, select all that apply. Are you a listener? Are you a guest? Are you a host? Are you a producer? Are you all of those things? So, what we're doing here is getting a sense of who is in the room. And boy, we've got a whole bunch of podcasters in the room, don't we? Excellent, excellent. All right, which is great because the first question I've got is specifically for those podcasters. What's what do you know now that you didn't know before? Okay, you're a podcaster. What is one thing that you know now that you didn't know before you started that you would like to share with other people, maybe people who are thinking about getting into podcasting so that they either A, didn't make don't make the same mistakes that you made, or they are going in forewarned. So if you've got something to add to that question, that conversation, give me a raise your hand, just like Trisha and Deb did. So Trisha, you're up first today.
Hello, everybody. The thing I know now, I'm about to launch my fifth season of my podcast in September, and the one thing I've learned is always thinking of sustainability, meaning energy. Do you have the energy to pull it off? Do you have the financial sustainability? Do you have the content to sustain it? Because it is very hard to do a podcast as those of us who know who are doing it. And the last thing I want to be scrambling for is money or energy or guest and content. So that's the one thing I've learned. And consistency as well, to just always show up on the day you say you're going to show up. If you're going to drop it Thursdays at 9, make sure you drop it every Thursday at 9, because people really, they work it into their schedule. And so that helps me be honest. The thing that I'm working on this season is going to be making sure I am recording and have specific days for recording and editing, so I have order in the chaos. So
Nice.
I
Very
hope
nice.
I hope that's helpful.
No, definitely. And before move on to the next person in the row, I want to share our results because I think we have most of the people have answered our first survey, which is what role do you play? So today we've got some listeners in the house. Excellent. Can't have a podcast without listeners. Guesting, hosting, and producing. So three-quarters of the folks in the room are listening to podcasts on a regular basis, it sounds like. Guests, 28 out of 33, so 85%. Hosting, we've got 14, at least 14 hosts in the room, 42%. And producers, 27% are producing. So great information for us, just so we know kind of who's in the room. All right, back to our question. We are asking about things you know now that you didn't know then. What's your answer, Deb?
Well, as one of the all of the aboves in the hall, and someone who hosts three and a half podcasts, one of them I'm a co-host on. I think the biggest lesson is it's been niggling at your head to just do it. There are easy ways to just get started. You do a live show and then upload. That's what I do for Gold Chat. But when I started my first one in 2016, I struggled months and months. Oh, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start a podcast. If you really want to, there are so many easy tools. Just do it. It can change. It can evolve with you. Um, so stop stopping yourself. That is the big advice.
Awesome. All right, Elizabeth.
Thank you very, very much. For me, the biggest challenge is justifying the time and energy commitment required to sustain a regular schedule and all the work that is involved, editing, booking hosts, follow-up, promoting, all the things when there's no money coming in for the podcast yet. And of course, you have to keep doing the podcast to generate money unless you have a sponsor from the beginning. So that's a huge challenge that I would love to get some feedback on how to solve that problem so I can sustain it and make money with it. Thank you.
Excellent. And I like how you put in no money coming in yet. Well
Right.
done.
Thanks.
All right. Lori Richardson.
Hey, Bobby and everybody.
Hi.
Yet is the operative word. That's a great word. Um, I inherited a podcast, as some people might know. It was my friend who she actually passed away, and she had a podcast called Conversations with Women in Sales, and I didn't want it to go away. So I asked her family if I could take it over from her, and I've been doing that ever since. My biggest thing, to be encouraging like Deb was, I thought what you said, Deb, was really great. I just want to say, just like when I started blogging years and years ago, you have no idea how you may have impacted someone, and you don't hear it. You don't get the answer. People don't respond and go, "Oh, I just listened to your podcast." I hear it years later. I was at an event in Dallas last month, and someone said, "Oh, I listen to every episode." And I went, "You do?" And it's just, you just got to know that if you're doing something, you're working hard at it, you're doing a good job, it's a good product, just keep doing it because people are affected. I'm sure, Bobby, you've heard that. You've gotten that feedback as well. It's one of the things you just learn over time. You just put it out there and see who it resonates with.
Awesome. Thank you. Marcia.
Yeah, I think I did good on the framing and stuff. So I've been consistent. My 100th episode is 2 weeks from now. I enjoy it. I still love it. So the consistency and stuff is for me not so much the challenge. I think I pitched it in the right place. I'm happy with how it's working. But it's just, it is, if you to do it well, it is expensive, right? I thought it, and I've looked at ways to cut corners and to do, ultimately, it takes a bit of money or it takes time, right? That you then don't have to make other money to do this well. And I don't really believe that there's many that really will make money. I would be happy if I break even on it, but I think there's other trade-offs. And I also agree that there's so many listeners who never give a peep. I have way more listeners than I ever thought, who seldom say anything. And I'm happily surprised every once in a while.
Nice. Okay. Judy.
I discovered something. I experimented first by doing my own recordings and can I say rabbit hole? So I decided not to pursue being my own producer. A few years later, along came an opportunity to be a podcast host with a production company doing the production. And if you're like me, that is ideal. I love doing the interviews, but I will talk about not making money. I would be so far in the hole. I experimented with doing live. I experimented with doing them, just recording them and putting them up. And I much rather be a host with somebody else doing the behind the scenes because it's a better product.
Nice. And that was actually my role. I was the host of a podcast pre-pandemic for MIT, and somebody else did all the heavy lifting on the interview editing. And so I was like, yep, I will show up and be your voice any day. All right, Angel.
All right. Well, I'm excited to be here. So, for me, I was guesting on podcasts as well as on telesummits for a decade before I started my first show. My first show I started in 2017, and I actually sold that show in 2020. I was the first independent podcaster to sell a show. That show, within 4 months, I had my first $50,000 client. So for me, I would say the things that I would encourage people to understand is that I like to say my podcast serves my business serves my life, and my life serves my purpose. My first show, I had the $50,000 client in 4 months. My second show, Wickedly Smart Women, which is now going to be 7 years old in September, 15-time award winning, number one internationally ranked, downloading in 149 countries. That show, I had my first five-figure client before it even launched. And my third show, Leading Visionaries, which will be three next month, 8-time award winning, number one internationally ranked, and downloading in 101 countries. That show has generated a multi six, and it will probably end up being a seven, maybe even eight-figure deal by the time all is said and done from one interview. So, what I would say is make sure you understand the revenue that you require in order to thrive in your business and have a business model that serves. And then the podcast becomes the mechanism by which your business is served.
Excellent. All right, we're going to come back to those getting the traction conversations. Jessica.
So, two things that I have learned is that if you are going to be doing solely interview podcasts, make sure you're booking them out way in advance. Because all of a sudden you may be sitting there one week and you don't have someone to interview. So if that happens, what are you going to do? That would be my first thing. And then the other one is a guest questionnaire that you can have someone submit prior to being on the podcast. This will allow you to see if they are the right person, the right fit. It will allow you to make sure that you're explaining exactly what is expected of them, the conversation that you want to have with them. And it's also a place where you can go ahead and have them put information that you can utilize as far as their introduction for the bio and headshots for promotion. So that would be the two things for me.
Collect those ahead of time, people.
Exactly.
Or use Innovation Women, where you can download those bios and those headshots right from the profiles.
Yep.
Little
Oh,
commercial
Bobby,
there,
if I can
folks.
have one more thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. Schedule more time than you think. I always schedule 90 minutes for recording. It doesn't necessarily take 90 minutes, but you have things that happen, technical issues. You have, they want to make changes to their bio because something has changed in the meantime. So yeah, I always have them factor in extra time whenever possible.
Awesome. All right. So after Jessica has said, we're going to move off to a new question. I'm looking for the unpopular opinions about podcasting. All right. If you've got what you think is probably an unpopular opinion about podcasting, I want to know. Deb, do you have an unpopular opinion about podcasting?
I did, but can I real quick yes and something Jessica just said?
Go for it.
Thank you. So for Gold Chat, which is my Monday panel show, I bring three friends together. If you're not my friend, we need to meet. So I do a mixer once a month where it's a goals mixer, but I tell people, if you want to be my friend, this is where you show up. And that is the way that I vet guests. So absolutely, you need a questionnaire. You need to know the people. But I find, and this is a time saver rather than doing one-on-ones with everybody, to gather them all together and then they collaborate. So it's like multiple wins. I'm going to think I do have an unpopular, but I want to phrase it. So I'm going to go back in the queue.
All right. Marcia?
Yeah, I think this is unpopular because of the feedback that I get. I speak instead of forms and stuff, I speak with every guest briefly before we record. Um, I don't do forms. I also decline a whole lot of these unsolicited things and stuff I get. I'm pretty ruthless, to whom I say, yes, I'll talk to you. But if I say yes, I want to pre-meet. It's for me to figure out whether the conversation would actually flow. I've had people who were recommended to me and I bypassed that conversation and then recorded a session, which is absolutely useless that I then end up not using. So I speak to all potential guests and I still say no after that point as well.
Okay. All right. Angel?
Well, my unpopular opinion is that a podcast is audio. I mean, that's how it started. And I am very, very interested in the audio. And so I have it in my, my guest prep materials that they need to have a professional microphone. And if they show up with their iPod or their earphone thingies, it's just not going to work. And I make them go away. And I tell them, here's the link. We give them a link for an actual microphone. And if they need to go away and get it, I give them one chance, go away and get a real microphone. And when you come back, I'm always going to test the microphone. I mean, I've won 23 awards and the audio is important and less, in my mind, important than video. Video is a TV show to me. My unpopular opinion is that podcasts are sound and sound first is where I focus.
Awesome. Yeah. When I was working for MIT, they used to send out a package to anybody who couldn't make it into the studio. And that package included microphones and an audio input box and all the works.
Yeah, and I want to speak just a little bit more, if you don't mind, Bobby, about I know Libsyn is now putting video automatically, and Spotify has done the video situation as well. I want to remind everyone that this is valuable content. And I'm not just going to automatically let Libsyn decide whether or not I'm satisfied with my valuable content and just randomly upload my videos. If I am going to do video, if I do decide I want to do video, then I'm going to be very selective about how I do that video and very intentional about how I do that video. And so, just because the big platforms are saying do video doesn't mean you have to do video, and certainly it doesn't mean you have to add more to your plate if you are not making any money. Like, make money first and do the simplest thing you can possibly do to make the most amount of money before you add more garbage to your plate just because a big platform says you should be video.
Good point. Excellent. All right. Orly.
So, my I don't know if it's unpopular, but I'm speaking as a guest, not as a podcast host. So I don't know if that's the right time to say anything. Is it okay?
Just go forth.
Okay. Just want to make sure. So this is something that I really learned the hard way. It's just because you get invited does not necessarily mean you should go. I was on and this is on me. I was on a podcast. I did not do enough research ahead of time. It was a co-host situation, and one of the co-hosts literally was belligerent during the entire thing to the point where I had to stop the interview because every word I would say, he would immediately start attacking me on the air. I know it was, and the other host did nothing to stop him, that was really the crazy thing. And after all of that, we did eventually resume. He was slightly better, but anyway, then I get this email. Oh, thank you for stepping in. Like, hello, that's your job. And oh, by the way, I'm no longer working with him. Like, okay, nice. So I don't know. To me, it's like, yeah, I think sometimes we get excited when people invite us, but not everyone is a fit, even if it sounds like it's a fit. And now I know better. I know to always ask more about the format and who's going to be there. But had I listened, I don't know. I don't know if maybe he was only belligerent with me because he was tired of being a co-host. I don't know. But anyway, I just wanted to share that little tidbit. So thank you.
All right. Kristen.
I'd say stay true to your audience. Ooh. And your podcast, regardless of what all the norms and the formats say. I got a little pushback on not introducing my guests with lengthy bios or establishing their credibility. But my podcast is for busy female entrepreneurs. So I give their name, I give where they work, and then we jump right into it. And if anyone wants to connect more, they're excited by the end of it, there's all kinds of ways that they can contact them. I want to push them into their ecosystem and not answer all the questions and give all the credibility up front. And I've received a lot of some pushback on, wait a minute, where's the 2-minute bio from podcast experts? Stay true to your audience, follow your gut and what feels right for you. Do not compare, do not compete, and you know what works for you, regardless of the pushback you get.
I find it crazy you're getting pushback on that. It's like if somebody does 2-minute intros, I've probably moved on to the next podcast.
And oddly, not from guests, but from podcast experts. Yeah, and whether it's they want to throw their weight around, why aren't you doing this? Is this the way the industry standard is? But just follow your gut and stay true to what you know your audience wants and what works for you and them.
All right. Well, I'm with you on that one. Okay. And of course, I don't have a podcast, so I can't say anything. All right. Deb.
I so love what you just said because it's all, it's your brand, it's your personality. Let it shine through. I don't know if this is popular or unpopular, but I'm throwing it out there. There are people who say this, and this is true. You do not need to host a podcast. You could be an expert on podcasts. However, I am a book proposal expert. So I help people write book proposals that get attention from agents and publishers. So if you do not have a podcast in your niche, someone else will. So you can start one, or you could put in the future marketing plan that you will be launching a podcast in line with your book release, but you are the thought leader. You are the expert. I know it's time, but you want to grab that audience, that niche, so no one else does. In your style and personality, because you are what makes your podcast.
Okay. And Helen, did you have something you wanted to add as well? I know you said you couldn't find the raised hands.
Yeah, the raised hand is escaping me today for some reason. I think it decided not to play. I put a couple things in the chat. I wanted to shout out Aniel because I think you're absolutely right. Good audio is premier. I'm a broadcaster by training. I've been in broadcasting for decades. But I will say that with the new platform editing, Descript and even Riverside, they will clean up lighter weight audio. So I have been recording basically for most of the time on either a less than expensive mic or on a headphone. And the audio cleans up beautifully to a point where my broadcast pals have said, "What equipment are you using?" And I have to kind of say, well, it's kind of like when people ask me, "Oh, who does your hair? Who colors your hair?" It's like, ooh, preference because I'm worth it. It's the same with the microphones. I find these days the $500 mic doesn't matter anymore. A good editing platform matters more because it will clean up. It'll drop background sounds. It'll give the voice some depth. It's really important. I appreciate that you have good equipment. I think that's brilliant. But if you don't, and you're worried about starting because you don't have that investment, don't worry about it because there's a lot of ways to get around that now that you could not have a number of years ago. And I come from early video, so I know a lot about what has changed technologically over the years. So that was a long rant on that. But I do like audio first. I do care about my audio. I care about the editing. I use video. If the guest would like to be on video, I use it for teases or highlights. Maybe I'll upload it to YouTube kind of as a tease to other podcasts, but I don't like the just jump on and talk to people and that's a podcast because it's not. I think it takes more than that to do it well. That being said, I'd also like to know how Angel made it to 50,000 views and all of that because the area is so crowded now. I'm finding it really hard to break through the clutter.
All right. So we're going to move on to a new question. And I'm going to come back to, the almighty moolah. How are you making money from your podcast? Is it sponsorship? Is it premium content? Is it listener support? Is it I get on, I do a podcast, and the clients just come flooding in? Talk to me about the money. Angel first, then Lori, then Trisha.
So my model is guest becomes client, and that has been my model since the beginning. Um, and so I have not taken sponsorships. I've not advertised. I've not done premium content. I have not done Patreon. I have not done listener support, although at the beginning, I did have a little donation thing for listeners if they wanted to make a donation, but that was like, lunch money. That wasn't real money. I also have set up what I call my red velvet rope option, which is for speakers who specifically are looking to have a time sensitive drop of their episode, because I have found that the people who are willing to invest in red velvet rope often also become clients. So it's not a requirement to do red velvet rope, but it's there and it's available and it gives them extra promotion. And it's, again, lunch money. It's like $497 to do red velvet rope. My pricing for my strategic work with people is, five figures and above. So it's really a good qualifier for me to have a conversation with somebody before we, you know, dive into deeper work with one another. And the question in the thing is, do your guests know they are prospects when you book them as guests? We have a form that they fill out, and the form has got multiple, many multiple choice areas where it's clear that I'm in business. I'm in business and I do business and I offer services, and they can choose whether or not they're a no, like they're not interested, um, or whether they're a maybe in the next 3 to 6 months, or whether they are, yes, I want to talk to Angel right away. So that's one of the qualifiers that we use.
Got
And
it.
I'm really clear that I have a business to serve, and the podcast is a servant of the business. The other thing I want to say is, just in the last 6 to 8 months, we have turned our Wickedly Smart Women um, brand. It's no longer simply a podcast. It's a brand now. The brand has now developed a listener facing offer, and we are deep in putting that out and getting, doing the market testing to get conversions for that. And that particular offer is to help women leaving corporate start consulting.
Very cool. All right. Lori.
Yes, I get sponsors, and I do that because I'm in a narrow niche. So if you're in a niche, it can be helpful. It's hard when you're part of a lot of noise out there. And I'm in the business to business space. I think it's the only podcast right now that's especially interviewing women that are in sales roles and sales leadership roles. It wins awards all the time. And I'm very fortunate in that because, again, because it's a narrow niche. So I find companies that benefit from that. It's different now. It's not as easy as it used to be, for sure. And but people do they do reach out and they do have some targets that they want to hit through our podcast. So I actually don't convert clients from my podcast because I work with a more broader audience of sales leaders. So that would be a good goal for me. Maybe I can figure that out over the summer. But I find that if you have a target, there are things that people want to get in. They want to get in front of your audience, and so it's a win-win.
Okay. All right, Trisha.
So I'm in a really um, unique situation in that I've been an artist for 30 years in many different mediums. I've had two women who have followed my work and supported it just in various ways. And so when I went into doing a podcast, Both of these women are extremely wealthy, and so they have been financially supporting this podcast, which has been the biggest gift ever, because that then allows me to really build a podcast without the revenue gun to my head. I do have Fractured Atlas as well, which is a fiscal sponsorship for artists. And so I can get and I've gotten some sponsors through then, again, people who listeners who want to support the podcast. But my primary funding comes from two people who have followed my work for years and support me. But what I use my podcast to do, the name of the show is No Time to Be Timid. It's conversations around courage and creativity, which has been targeting artists mostly. So I haven't, artists for artists. We don't have a ton of money here. But what it does do for me is build my credibility in other areas. But what's interesting is now I have entrepreneurs and business people who are jumping onto this podcast. And so that's going to be I'm just interested to hear how people are getting clients out of their guest and how it actually supports the business. Because that's not been something I've had to think about, because these women are like, we're behind you and we love your mission and what you're doing. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful, but if you have friends out there who love your work, don't be afraid to ask.
Excellent. All right, Deb.
Different ways. As an author, the primary purpose or moneymaker for my audience, for my podcast, is networking, authority, credibility. As an author and speaker, goal chat. I have books on goals. The book proposal podcast, I am the book proposal expert, as I said before. It is within my niche, but also to get in front of audiences and other people's audience. I use it for networking, bringing people together, raising everybody's visibility. 3 of my podcasts are on the Marketing Podcast Network. And if anybody's interested in learning more, we're always looking for great marketing shows. And every 3 months, a little bit of money ends up in my account. It's not the same as angel lunch money, but it is lunch money or a shopping trip. But it's being in a community of podcasters that uplift and guest and increase visibility for others. So it's another couple options all mixed into one.
Awesome. All right. And I dropped another question into the chat. So what I'm looking for, and share this in the chat, folks. Do you have a favorite tool or a platform? What are you using to record, to edit, to distribute? If you can share that in the chat, be super helpful for people. But for discussion, we're going to move on. We're going to talk now about podcast guesting. So from both sides, from the host side, from the guest side, what do you think makes someone a great podcast guest? And you can answer this as well if you listen to podcasts and you're like, that is a fabulous guest. And I'm going to remind everybody again, you're here because we want to hear from you and we also want to quote you. So if you share something either in the chat or in the discussion, that potentially end up in an article that we are going to do as a follow-up to this session. All right, Marcia, you're up first, and then Judy.
Yeah, for me, it's three things. The main thing is that you can, I want you as a guest, I want you to have your topic and your subject matter, but I want you to be able to tune it to my audience or what the podcast is about, right? So I have great guests who tune their subject matter into what we're trying to do with the podcast and audience we're trying to reach, and that to me is important. Who are aware of that we want to give the audience something, so we pre-agree on that and we actually deliver on that. I also Now I forgot about the third one, which was a big one. I'll come back
Rule
to
of
that.
three, rule of three.
Oh yeah, I have what I really hate is when people go on too long. So a good guest to me also, creates natural pauses where I can choose to take back the conversation. I've had guests who just ramble on forever, and that also makes any editing or any shortening really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Judy.
I love to hear people who are enjoying themselves when they're on a show. When it feels like a natural conversation, that is the best. And one of my favorite podcast hosts is Lenny because he knows everybody and he's very super smart and he brings on people who have wonderful things to share and nobody's being pitchy. I think that of all the things that drives me nuts is when people come on and they are just being pitchy, pitchy, pitchy. Not the purpose. The purpose is to let people get to know you. If they like you, give them a link at the end and then they'll follow up with you. And I've heard people just kind of go off the deep end. But if you stay in your lane, if you bring some humor to it, you bring your flavor, those are the most enjoyable shows, in my opinion. And I'm going to stick with that.
Excellent. All right, Kristen.
Hi. I love that I get to interview people who have never been on a podcast before. Most of them are great. They're business owners and they're great at doing their business and they get in front of the camera. So prepping them in a way that they feel comfortable. And some of the things I prep them with are stories and anecdotes. I say, don't worry about going on too long. I can always cut you out. Just trying to get them to be in their natural state. Don't just answer the question. Don't just add something to the conversation. Come with stories and anecdotes. That's what keeps the audience wanting to listen for the next 2 or 3 minutes because they have to hear the end of the story. And the other thing is, this is not a podcast. There's no audience. It's you and me sitting at a coffee shop and someone's leaning over, fallen off their chair because they want to listen to our conversation. Don't address the audience. Don't say for the listeners out there. That's when it starts to get sales pitchy. Yeah, Bobby, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's when we get pitchy that do not invite them into our conversation. This is you and me and deep breaths and let's roll. And it just is so much fun when they get to the end and they go, that went by too quickly. We want them to be relaxed. So no sales. Thank you for whoever said that. And just relax and tell stories like you would tell your girlfriends.
Awesome. All right, Angel, then Amy, Trisha, Michelle, and then Orly, and then Elizabeth. Whew. All right.
So a great guest for me respects my platform and they respect my platform and the work that I have put in by showing up the way we've asked them to show up. We have, a very extensive process that we put them through. I have a team behind the scenes that, sends out all the information. And if they show up, again, without the right, with their Bluetooth earphones on or, just not respecting the platform, then I'm done with them. I work hard. My team works hard. We're giving huge, huge visibility to people. We're downloading in 149 countries with one show, 101 countries with the other show. I have multiple awards. I've been doing it for a long time, and I expect them to respect my platform. That's number one. The second thing that makes a great guest is a guest who shares their episode more than once. So one of the things that I do at the end, after I've shut off the recording, is I remind my guests, unless it's a red velvet rope, because the red velvet ropes are time sensitive and they're specific to like usually a book launch or a program launch. But if it's a regular guest who has not paid to be on the show, then I remind them that this content is evergreen and it's not just a one and done thing. Use it again and again and again and again and again and continue to tag us and we will continue to tag you. There's no reason why, if you do a great episode on my show, you can't share it multiple times. Like, why are we making more work for ourselves? Rinse and repeat. And then the third thing that makes a great guest, and let me be clear for everybody here, not every guest becomes a client. That would be freaking awesome if every guest became a client. But that's not the case. So I have guests that are going to build my brand because they're big names, and they're maybe never going to become a client. And then I have guests that are just pure content that are maybe never going to become a client. And then I have guests that are going to build my bank account. So a great guest is a bank account building guest as well.
Awesome. All right, Amy.
Okay, as a guest, also I have a minor show that I'm trying to launch over on YouTube. So I'm taking in all this information, but can I tell you, as a guest, I think one of the biggest things I need to do for podcasters is listen to the show in advance. What does that conversation look like? I will say I've been on shows though where hosts didn't investigate me. They didn't learn anything about me. They knew nothing about me before I went on the show. And those are really hard for, I mean, I'll make a conversation work, but really, like, you just asked me a basic question before we even started the show that all you had to do was look at my LinkedIn profile. Like, it's not that hard. And I'm feeling really good about the way I guessed right now after listening to your guys' comments.
Oh dear. All right. And I'm also going to say I once guested on a show with somebody who knew too much about me. And I was like, where did you find that out? And do not mention it ever again. Okay. All right. Trisha, you're up next.
Yeah. So the name of my show is No Time to Be Timid. So my guest has to be willing to be vulnerable and talk about when they were scared, because that's the point of the show, is to say, what have you done to get through things that were hard for you? So I interviewed Vince Gill, who you may know as the country music star who's won like, I don't know, 22 Grammys or something. And all we talked about are the times he was scared. And it was a fabulous interview because nobody needs to know all about. I mean, okay, yaddy yaddy, you won a bunch of awards. Please tell me when you were scared. And so I have to have guests who are willing to step into that space to talk about the times when, when I teach storytelling, we're always like, it's great that you climbed Mount Everest, but I really want to know the time you wanted to turn back. Like, that's the kind of topic that I want to be able to talk about. And if you can't talk about that, then you're not really going to be a good fit for the show. And what I do to help make sure my guest is a good guest, because I think I have responsibility in that. It's not just a one-sided thing. I do research. I'm cracking up that somebody researched way too much about you, Bobby. I didn't know that was possible. but I know I've done my work when someone will say, no one has ever asked me that question before, in a good way. And what I normally do is just listen to all of their other interviews and then ask that next question that the person didn't ask, right? Not that it's intrusive or prying. Thank you for the heads up, but just allowing them to go to places that maybe other interviews haven't allowed them, interviews allowed them to go. So, but vulnerability is a very big factor in who I bring on the show. And if they're willing to say, yeah, this was hard and this is how I got through it, and I'm not great all the time. That's what makes a good guest for me.
Excellent. All right. Michelle, Orly, Elizabeth. And we're getting toward the end of our time here, folks. So heads up.
Hi. Thanks, Bobby, for everything. I'm going to start with not just how I struggled or what evolved, but how I really broke through my greatest fear. So maybe it's what the last person was talking about. It's like really leaping outside of the usual mistakes or the usual comments that we hear, and giving tools in terms of how others can apply it the same. So I love listening to podcasts that give me the how, and I do my best to always give tools to how other people can do it as well. And I would say I also enjoy listening to those where, again, it's leaping outside your comfort zone. And because it's yes, vulnerability and it's storytelling and it's experiencing the struggle, but I'll just add to that, feeling that it's really authentic, feeling that it's really, I haven't scripted it and I'm just telling you from my heart and creating that safe space, that I'm really talking to you heart to heart. And we can do that even over Zoom. And I would say, I love being with hosts who interrupt and we really have a natural give and take and, really discover things together. Let me end it with that. A new discovery for both of us that we share with the audience. So that's what I have found to be really helpful.
It helps if I unmute.
I was going to say.
All right, Orly, best practices on mute.
On mute, I know. So I just wanted to share. I don't mean, I feel like I'm just giving horror stories here, but this one podcast I was on, and this guy, he's got like, I don't know, 100,000 downloads every month or something. And I honestly, to me, this was like really amazing that every time I would say something, he would literally take over the conversation and then answer my question for me and then keep going. And I just thought, wow. Yeah. So, and I did listen to his podcast, but I don't, or maybe I just don't remember. But I think what makes for a good conversation is where you allow the person to give their feedback and then you kind of riff off of each other. Those are the podcast interviews that I've really enjoyed, where there's and there is a script in terms of these are the points I want to hit from the host. And then I practice those. I come in, and that's why it sounds like a conversation, because I've thought about it. So being prepared and also making sure that, again, listening to the podcast ahead of time. But sometimes these things happen. And anyway, I don't share the podcast as a result, because it's just, I mean, it's just literally listening to him talk the whole time. So anyway.
All right. Yep. Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you. So this is really, really informative. I appreciate it very much. My podcast is called The Goddess Power Show with Elizabeth Ann Atkins, and we talk about spirituality a lot. And for me, when a guest comes on and is very esoteric and talking in these big terms that everyday people can't relate to about spirituality, it's extremely frustrating and there's nothing you can do. It's boring. Nobody understands. And when you confuse, you lose. So the best podcast guests are able to take lofty concepts and distill them down for everyday people to understand and apply. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So we're getting toward the end of our time here. I'm curious what people think the future holds for podcasting, podcasters, guesting. If there is something that you have a little crystal ball in your pocket, or maybe you're seeing a trend going forward, podcasting is a very, very crowded place these days. Yep, I agree with you, Elizabeth. AI voices, like we're seeing a lot of that. Are there things that people are seeing or think they are going to see in the future of podcasting? And I will point back to the conversation about short podcasts too. So, length, are we going to see even shorter ones? Judy and then Deb.
Well, I feel that the lines are blurring between podcasts and books, and especially with what Spotify is doing, because they're now not only offering ebooks, they're going to be offering print books. And the idea that you can take your book and turn that into a podcast or turn a podcast into a book, I think that's going to be more and more popular. And I love what you just said, Bobby, that a podcast doesn't have to be forever. It could be a limited series. It could be something that you do when it fits and then you take a break, or it can be seasonal. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. But I heard an interesting statistic that even though there are hundreds and thousands of podcasts, there are only about 14%, I think about 100, I think the number was 140 that people actually consistently listen to. So it's a very narrow niche when you're good. And I think Angels found it. So even though it's crowded, you can still stand out by delivering value to your audience.
All right. Deb and Lori?
This question about AI comes up a lot on Gold Chat, and we always have this answer. AI cannot replicate us. And I think as podcasters, it's really important to remember there are a lot of things that AI can do, but it cannot be us interacting with other us's. So my hope is and one of my biggest joys is when I have guests on Gold Chat who go off and they do projects together. So bringing the community aspect, making it more interactive, getting people more involved in other things that are adjunct off podcasts is what I'm hoping, fingers crossed, is the trend of the podcasting moving forward.
Lori and then Angel?
Yeah, we've seen such a huge increase in in-person events because people trust being in person. And so how can you do things on your podcast that help build trust? I think that that's what's most important. And I know for me, I did a bunch of in-person interviews, which I'm going to be showing and playing audio and video separately over the next months. And I think that that's a really important thing. It's something we see in B2B all the time.
Okay. And Angel?
Yeah, I just want to bring some stats that there are probably 4.5 million shows right now, but roughly 44% of all registered podcasts have only produced 3 episodes. So I want everyone to understand that it is not by any stretch of the imagination saturated. There's 115 million YouTube channels. So podcasting is still very nascent. It's only 20 years old. And I would come back to what I talked about initially, which is, are you clear that your podcast is there to serve your business? Or is it a hobby or just some personal, creative expression? And so just be clear on what the purpose is behind your creating all of this content. And I think that, as long as there's business, there's a place for podcasts, and clarity is going to be what wins at the end.
Excellent. Great thing to end on, getting everybody off to their next meeting on time. I'm going to drop into the chat the link to register for our next roundtable. That will be in June, and that will be on June 11th at 12 p.m. Eastern. So I hope you'll all join us and keep your eyes open for the article from this session. You may be quoted. Thanks a lot for joining, everybody. Take care. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.